Doomsday is often described as the monster who killed Superman, but that's not really what makes him interesting, because Doomsday isn't just a physical threat, he's a moral one. Every time he appears, he forces the people around him to reveal who they truly are. In the comics, he is the inevitable result of science without compassion. In the DC animated universe, he is a weapon born from fear, used to justify cruelty and a test of how far Superman is willing to bend before he breaks. For as much as Doomsday is the destroyer of worlds, what he really does is expose truth. The real question he forces the heroes to ask is, what are we willing to become in order to stop him? Before talking about how he was used in Justice League Unlimited, let's first look back at the comic book source material. Doomsday first appeared in Superman the Man of Steel number 17 in 1992, but at the time he arrived, without context. He didn't get an immediate origin, there was no explanation of where he'd come from or even what his motivations were. He didn't even speak, he was just a fist punching a metal wall. And that mystery was the point, he was less of a character and more of an event, the instigator of the death of Superman. His true origin would come years later and it reframed him as a tragic victim of science. Hundreds of thousands of years ago, on a prehistoric Krypton, far deadlier than the shining world Superman came from, an alien geneticist named Bertron set out to create the ultimate life form. Krypton's atmosphere was poisonous, its landscape was brutal and its wildlife was monstrous. To Bertron, it was the perfect test environment. He created a child and hurled it into the wild. The infant was torn to pieces within seconds. Bertron collected the remains, cloned the child again, and repeated the experiment over and over for years. Each death became data, helping Bertrand refine his son. The child evolved through trauma and adapted through murder. Eventually it could breathe in Krypton's toxic atmosphere, but that still left the wild predators to overcome, so Bertrand continued. After years of engineered suffering, eventually the creature no longer needed to be cloned. It would die, but it would come back to life and start fighting back. Over time, it wiped out every predator on the planet. Bertrand had achieved his goal, a being who could not only survive death, but return immune to whatever had killed it. But there was a flaw in the design. Doomsday had been exposed only to pain, hostility, and death. So it evolved not just physically but psychologically too. It developed a primal hatred for all life. When it achieved Bertrand's goal, Doomsday turned on its creator and slaughtered everyone in the lab. Although by killing all of the hostile life on the planet, it allowed Krypton to develop and eventually become the society we know now. After clambering on board a vessel that fled the planet, Doomsday became a wandering extinction event, tearing through planet after planet. He decimated Bylon 5, killed Darkseid's champion, slaughtered Green Lanterns, and defied the Guardians of Oa. He was unstoppable, and all anyone could do was send him away to some other civilization to deal with. He was finally stopped on Calaton, where only the self-sacrifice of the planet's ruling family took him down, but only briefly. Unaware that death only made him stronger, the survivors chained his body inside of a burial craft and hurled it into space, hoping that that would be the end of it. But it eventually crashed on Earth. When Doomsday awoke, he tore free from his restraints and cut a path of destruction across the countryside, effortlessly overwhelming the Justice League, none of whom could stop him. And it was Booster Gold who gave the creature the name Doomsday. As Superman joined the fight, the monster advanced relentlessly across America, adapting in real time and targeting Superman. We'd later learn that Doomsday had a particular hatred for Superman because it recognized his Kryptonian DNA, seeing his father's face in him. By the time they reached Metropolis, both were bloodied beyond recognition. The shockwaves of their strike shattered the city, and finally, in front of the Daily Planet, Superman and Doomsday delivered simultaneous killing blows, dying together. While the world mourned Superman, Doomsday's body was taken for study, only to be launched back into space by the cyborg Superman Hank Henshaw. But death had never been permanent for Doomsday. He would rise again, stronger than ever before. In later stories, he battled Darkseid again on Apokolips and proved immune even to the Omega Beams. In a bid to finally end him, Superman ultimately cast Doomsday to the literal end of time, a place where entropy should have erased him from existence. But even that failed. Brainiac later manipulated the timeline to retrieve Doomsday before Oblivion and took control of his body. That plan collapsed, and once again Doomsday was left unbound. Eventually, the Justice League contained him by splitting his molecules across 4 teleportation devices, trapping him in a state of endless displacement. Because that is the central truth of Doomsday. He cannot be reasoned with, he cannot be permanently killed, he cannot reform, he can only be contained. Doomsday is evolution without empathy, forged in suffering, built only to endure and to destroy, completely without morals. And that core essence of who he is was carried over to the DC Animated Universe version of the character, with some significant changes. Doomsday first appeared in the Justice League episode A Better World Part 1. Much like his comic book counterpart, he arrived on Earth, seemingly contained within a meteorite that had come from space. He tore a path of destruction through America heading towards Metropolis. At the time, the Justice League had been kidnapped by their authoritarian counterparts from another dimension, the Justice Lords. So it was up to them to deal with him. And do let me know in the comments below if you want me to make a video about them in the future. An immediate difference between the comic book Doomsday and the animated Doomsday is that this Doomsday could speak complete sentences. He came to cause destruction, not for any particular reason, just because he wanted to, and he immediately hated the Justice Lords. Doomsday was their first challenge, and he gave them the opportunity to demonstrate their ruthless methods. While they tried to beat him in a hand-to-hand fight, Doomsday was too strong for them, even Lord Superman. He couldn't beat Doomsday into submission, so he used his heat vision to lobotomise him, burning away part of his brain, turning him into a passive, hollow husk. By lobotomising Doomsday, Lord Superman ensured a threat that could have destroyed the Earth could never strike again, a cold act of utilitarian necessity. But in doing so, he stripped a being of any agency, showing how absolute power can twist even the noblest intentions into tyranny. And I'm sure there will be viewers of this video that don't see anything wrong with Lord Superman's actions, but others will recognise that taking away a being's mind, no matter how monstrous, crosses a line that turns heroism into authoritarian control, and that was the point. Now, in A Better World, the Justice Lords were the main threat. Doomsday was only included to demonstrate their immoral brand of justice. But Doomsday returned later on in Justice League Unlimited in the episode The Doomsday Sanction, where he fulfilled a similar role. Here his backstory was retconned slightly to reveal that Doomsday was not an extraterrestrial threat, or at least not in the way we had assumed. He was a clone of Superman created by Project Cadmus, a secretive government agency set up to protect America from the Justice League. Unlike Bizarro, who was an unintentionally flawed clone of Superman, Doomsday's DNA had been altered to make him stronger and more aggressive. But being stronger than Superman wasn't enough. He had to hate him. So Cadmus psychologically tortured him, tormenting him daily and pretending that Superman was to blame. He was intended to be their last line of defense, but when they realized he was uncontrollable, they tried to launch him into space, making him someone else's problem. But Doomsday knocked his containment ship off course, which brought him crashing back down to Earth, where he began his rampage and fought the Justice Lords. Ever since being lobotomized by Superman, Cadmus had kept him securely locked up, thinking that the threat was under control. However, when the Weasley Professor Milo was fired from the project, he visited Doomsday. He deduced that Doomsday had recovered and sought to align himself with him to get his revenge. Milo told Doomsday that Superman wasn't responsible for his torment, it was Amanda Waller, and offered to release him to deal with their mutual problem. Doomsday agreed and swiftly murdered Milo, bringing his specific problem to an end. From here, he tore his way through Cadmus and sought out Superman. The knowledge that Superman was not responsible for his torment didn't matter to him. So what if he'd been manipulated? All he wanted to do was kill Superman. While Superman and the Justice League were evacuating the volcanic island of San Baquero, Doomsday struck. Superman had been trying to ease pressure on the volcano to prevent an eruption, but Doomsday interrupted. He didn't care about the cost of innocent life, he didn't care that Superman was not responsible for anything that had happened to him. All he cared about was murder. Doomsday was relentless, and in his desperation, Superman attempted to lobotomize him again, and that is a pretty big deal given how disgusted Superman had been by Lord Superman's actions. But it was ineffective. Doomsday had evolved beyond that. The same trick would not work twice. Ultimately, Superman threw Doomsday into the volcano, causing the eruption that he had tried so hard to prevent, and it destroyed the island. But of course, Doomsday endured. Encased in volcanic rock, the Justice League took Doomsday to the Watchtower to interrogate him. When he wouldn't cooperate and made clear that he would never stop hunting them, Superman cast him into the Phantom Zone, a near inescapable, agonizing prison which was barely more humane than a lobotomy. Superman had previously cast the Kryptonian fascist Jack Mala into the Phantom Zone, and had briefly been sent there himself, so he knew exactly what he was doing to Doomsday, and he did it without hesitation. Ultimately, Doomsday tested Superman's morality and showed that he was willing to compromise his beliefs if the situation demanded it. The thing I really appreciate about the DCAU take on Doomsday is how they really streamlined his origins. They took the idea that he was also Kryptonian, but instead of being a primordial torture baby, he was a warped reflection of Superman created out of fear. While he had been aged to maturity, he was technically a child. His mind had been warped by his creators. But the thing that stops him from being sympathetic is the fact that when this is revealed to him, he doesn't care. He's fully committed to murder. He also illustrated how the authorities were willing to do terrible things when they felt endangered. The American government feared the Justice League. They'd already seen how much damage Superman could do when he'd been brainwashed by Darkseid. But now there was a superpowered army floating above them in a space station with a massive cannon pointing down at them. They felt that their backs were against the wall and they had to come up with the means of defending themselves. Doomsday, in a twisted way, justified that fear. He showed that a being with Superman's power could level cities, devastate continents and become unstoppable. Cadmus was wrong in its methods, but it wasn't wrong to recognize how fragile the world really was. The tragedy is that in trying to protect humanity from a potential god, they created a monster that actually personified their fears. And this happened because they rooted their defense in cruelty. They lied to and manipulated Doomsday, making him hate indiscriminately. He should have been their protector, but instead they created the personification of hatred, a warped image of Superman, perhaps how they saw him. This nicely mirrors Doomsday's comic book origin, where he was intended to be the ultimate form of life that would never die and made Krypton habitable, while at the same time it frames the American government, specifically the staff at Project Cadmus, as people willing to do awful things to secure their own safety. In the end, Doomsday is simple. He destroys, he adapts, he survives. He is a force without conscience. Evolution without empathy, a problem that cannot be negotiated with. The complicated part has always been Superman, because every time the monster rises, the Man of Steel is forced to confront the temptation to compromise, to control, to decide unilaterally what must be done for the greater good. And each time he faces Doomsday, the real battle isn't just about stopping a creature that can't be killed. It's about proving that power doesn't have to abandon principle when fear demands it. Because if Superman ever truly becomes what it takes to permanently end Doomsday, then the monster didn't win by surviving, he won by ruining the hero. Okay, that's it for this essay. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, leave a comment, tell all your friends about me. You know how YouTube works. If you really liked the video and feel like tossing a buck or two my way, please consider using the thanks button, because every little helps. And if you have really enjoyed my work, you might want to pick up a copy of my book, Rogues Gallery. It features 22 essays on villains from Batman the Animated Series. There's a beautiful cover by Batman the Animated Series background artist John Calmette, a foreword by director Dan Reber, and a moving segment from the late Kevin Conroy sharing his thoughts on life, love, and loss. Plus, an exclusive essay on the Condiment King that will never be made into a video. Rogues Gallery is available worldwide on Amazon, both digitally and in softcover. Finally, channel memberships are just $1.99 a month and give you early access to my essays, custom emojis, and your name featured on my members end screen, which has been rolling for a little while now. Huge thanks to everyone who's already part of this. You've helped to make these videos possible. If you want to see your name up here too, join the channel now. And while I have your attention, please consider checking out my other channel, Serum Lake Comics, where I talk about mostly DC comic books. Next time. On Monday, you asked for it, so you're going to get it. A new Batman the Brave and the Bold video looking at the interdimensional imp, Batmite. And next Friday, it's time to go back to the streets of Neo Gotham to talk about the first time the Batman of the future faced a superpowered threat and found himself out of his depth. Yes, it's time to talk about Blackout. Hope to see you then.